Alaska, a country situated on the edge of the Arctic. Dream destination for wildlife and nature lovers who answer to the call of the wild. A land of bears, glaciers, pioneers and prospectors on the northern tip of the American continent. In Vancouver, Canada's Pearl of the Pacific Ocean, begins an extraordinary journey along the Alexander Archipelago in the Gulf of Alaska. A charming capital with European flair. West of the city is the vast Stanley Park, the city's green lung. Brightly painted native Indian totem poles represent various tribes of the northwest coast. In English Bay, a giant metal crab guards the planetarium. And by aquabus, our journey travels across False Creek to Science World with its marvellous glass globe that contains a museum of modern art. It was here that the first classical Chinese garden was created for the World Exhibition. Vancouver's colourful Chinatown is the second largest after that in San Francisco. Here, the building's a little more than 100 years old. In recent years, many skyscrapers have been built close to the harbour. This, the capital of the southwestern province of British Columbia, has developed into a well-respected financial centre. The old town of Gastown. Its founder, John Dayton, Gassy Jack. He could not have imagined this would one day be the third largest city in Canada. Next to the snow-white tinted roof of the densely built quay near to Canada Place is the centre of a new harbour, where cruise ships from all over the world come and go. In the morning, our boat is at the pier, ready to take on both passengers and luggage. 629 cabins, 1,260 passengers and 557 crew. In the afternoon, passengers enjoy the sight of Vancouver from the upper deck. While the band plays. For the next few days, the hustle and bustle of the city will be exchanged for the solitude and beauty of the sea, glaciers, and numerous tiny settlements. Our Alaskan adventure can begin. Early in the morning, passengers are already on the upper deck, enjoying the sunrise and anticipating arrival at our first port of call. Ketchikan. The passengers go ashore. This small town is located 526 nautical miles north of Vancouver and was founded by the Tlingit Indians. In this remote place, jewellery comes as a surprise in the streets of downtown, Front Street and Mill Street. In the 1880s, the town based its economy on salmon and timber, but today relies upon tourism. Creek Street is a wooden construction on posts located along Ketchikan Creek, previously the city's red light district, but now full of elegant shops and restaurants. A bald eagle demonstrates the benefit of fish. Even with frequent rain, the town's many souvenir and art shops create a fine sales ambience for the products of the descendants of the native Indians. short ride on a funicular leads to a higher-lying district. Each tiny area of land here is used for building. This is the location of Cape Fox Lodge, a place of tranquility amid the busy life of a small town that each day is the destination of several cruise ships. The view to the small harbour, Ketchikan Creek, and the Tongass National Forest is quite breathtaking. The former fish camp of the Tlingit Indians has now become a meeting place for tourists. But the history of the native Indians has not been forgotten, and their culture has been preserved with pride. In the Totem Heritage Centre, America's largest collection of totem poles is on display. An age-old skill rescued from decay. The centre is responsible for the conservation of many Indian villages and features paintings, Native American beads and basketry. The artistic heritage of the Tlingit Indians has been lovingly restored and is a splendid sight. The totem pole, Raven Stealing the Sun, is a recent example of the art of carving and is typical as a representation of tribal history. It is mainly animal motifs such as eagles, whales and bears that adorn totem poles, not images of torture, as is often mistakenly assumed, but peaceful symbols of the native American Indian. In the sunshine of the afternoon, the ship leaves Ketchikan and heads north. Our journey along the coast proceeds. Each year, around 1 million tourists from all over the world enjoy this trip. Next day, we visit Juneau. Since 1900, the capital city of Alaska, the 49th state of the USA. In 1880, Joe Juneau, Richard Harris and their Tlingit Indian leader, Chief Kowee, discovered gold in Gold Creek. The gold rush began. Adventurers and fortune seekers settled here, and the city of Juneau gradually developed. In the historic Old Town district, there are 143 original buildings that had originally been built in pioneering days, now lovingly restored. The town has no road links with the outside world and can only be reached by boat or plane. Since Juneau is also the seat of government, about half of its residents are officials. But most of the time, it's the tourists who dictate the life of the city. The spacious and speedy gondolas of the Mount Roberts tramway travel 548 meters up the mountain of the same name, just beyond the city. The higher the gondola climbs, the more beautiful are the views of the city, the harbour with its cruise ships, the Gastineau Channel, the Chilkat Mountains, and the Inside Passage. From here, it's easy to see how little space remains for the settlement, because Juneau is only the gateway to the glaciers. There's still time to go whale watching. A small boat takes us to where the giants of the seas are usually to be found. They suddenly appear. Humpback whales are drawn to the coast of Alaska in summer, where they unite to form groups of up to 10. They're up to 15 meters long, can weigh 30 tons, and have broad tail fins. They're also very adept at traveling vast distances. We return to Juneau. The trip was well worth it, and the next adventure is about to begin. The large Mendenhall Glacier travels from Juneau Icefield to Mendenhall Valley, 19 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. Melting water plunges into the lake below. Unusually warm summers speed up the process. Unfortunately, the ice of the glacier is melting fast. In 2004, around 183 meters was lost. After traveling through the night, the ship reaches the gateway to Yukon early in the morning. Following the discovery of gold in the Klondike area in 1890, steamship captain William Moore founded the city of Skagway as the gateway to the goldfields. It attracted hordes of adventurers. Within a short time, there were 20,000. But a few years later, the gold ran out and the population decreased to around 500. The gold miners' power station survived, but now it's almost deserted, with just a few buildings hidden behind wooden facades. Today, masses of tourists invade the jewelry and souvenir shops in the historic streets of the northernmost port city of the Inside Passage. However, calm returns when the visitors have gone back to their ships, and only a faint nostalgic memory of the gold rush sweeps through the streets. The locals have quickly adjusted to tourism, and they provide visitors with the usual tempting ways to spend their money. Ragtime accompanies life in the Red Onion Saloon, where once the notorious Soapy Smith gang helped new arrivals to unexpectedly part with their cash. The Brothel Museum was once a popular whorehouse. Here, the rooms and clothing of a bygone era are on display. The hard-earned money of months often changed hands in a single night. There's time for a trip up White Pass on a narrow-gauge railway. With the assistance of the conductor, the train driver couples the freight cars to the locomotive. As in bygone days, the tickets are checked while the train travels slowly to the mountains. The route was built in 1898 for the Klondike Gold Rush in just 26 months. More than 10,000 men and 450 tons of explosives were needed to create a railroad from the seaport of Skagway over White Pass to Whitehorse, Yukon. Through 2 tunnels and across several bridges until White Pass is marked by a sign. In 1988, the railway line was reopened and had 37,000 passengers. But in 2011, there were 380,000 passengers who wanted to experience Alaska's first railroad on the former route of the Gold Rush. The train returns promptly to the train station situated at the pier, and immediately disappears behind various buildings. It's now evening and passengers board. The night journey begins. Next morning, we arrive at our main destination, Glacier Bay. The Bay of the Glacier was completely covered by ice and glaciers around 4,000 years ago during the Little Ice Age. The ice melted, and the ever-changing glaciers are today situated within the arms of the bay, which stretches almost 100 kilometres to the north. Glaciers are rivers of ice. They never stand still, but move towards the sea and eventually break up, with imposing walls of ice continuously creating new forms. The ship approaches the Margerie Glacier, and eventually the ship turns and travels along 17 glaciers. Today, there's little to be seen of the gigantic glaciers that were once here. Time for some more treats. There's a tasty buffet on the upper deck, and the sight of the pristine natural landscape heightens the senses even more. The ship is well equipped, and life on board is comfortable. As early as 1880, the Pacific Coast Steamship Company began with the Inside Passage. And in 1886, the trip was already so popular that the number of cruisers had to be doubled. The last section of the journey leads through College Fjord, an impressive tributary of Prince William Sound. Our last meal on board is served in the ship's main 2-story restaurant. Food is an important and welcome part of any cruise, and this is no exception. Next morning we arrive at Seward, our final destination. The small harbour city is located picturesquely between Resurrection Bay and Mount Marathon, and surrounded by green mountains close to a fish-rich bay. The year-round ice-free natural harbour, discovered in 1793 by the Russians, was used as a shipyard. and only began to develop into a city in 1903. It was then that a railway line travelled from Seward inland to Fairbanks, the Alaska Railroad. The city was named patriotically after William Seward, an American politician who, in 1867, bought Alaska from the Russians. Amazingly, it only cost him $7 million. The modern Alaska Sea Life Center on the shores of the bay is a fascinating combination of museum, research center, and oceanarium. It was founded in 1998, primarily to investigate the effects caused by the Exxon Valdez environmental disaster. It features the life cycle of the dominant fish of the region, the Pacific salmon. It also has lots of other items of interest, including a number of innovative aquariums. A fascinating window into the underwater world of Alaska. There's still time for another adventure. A visit to a nearby husky farm. Here the dogs are bred and trained. Even without snow, the dog team has to be moved frequently. In summer, wheels instead of skids. An entertaining adventure. In pioneering days before the railroad, the Iditarod Trail helped to make the wilderness and the interior accessible. It was a dog sled route to the hinterland of Seward. Today, the Iditarod race is one of the toughest in the world. It takes about 2 weeks from Anchorage to Nome. The Harding Icefield is located 6 kilometres north of Seward and extends high above the Gulf of Alaska. A footpath leads along the edge of the massive glacier, 113 kilometres long, 48 kilometres wide. The ice flows of the 32 glaciers of the Kenai National Park fjords are now melting faster than they can grow, and the fjords are becoming larger. And still, the landscape is a huge wonder of nature, a remote world of ice and snow. Alaska is the epitome of vastness, wilderness, and natural scenery. A unique habitat far from civilization. The Seward Highway crosses the Kenai Peninsula. The highway passes splendid glacial lakes, rivers, and green hills. And the Chugach Mountains are a dramatic sight. Next, we reach the capital. Anchorage, the largest city in Alaska and the economic and cultural center of the country. A modern metropolis of the wilderness. At first glance, a typical American city. Skyscrapers in the center and small buildings in the suburbs. At first, the settlement was called Ship Creek, named after the river of the same name. It was a place where ships could anchor, so the original tent city was soon named Anchorage. The name Alaska City was rejected. It was a home to the Tlingit Indians, the Kodiak Inuits, and Russian fur traders. The tent city soon became a camp and centre of administration during construction of the Alaska Railroad from Seward to Fairbanks. Just after the buildings of the suburbs, the wilderness begins. The city is also proud of the Anchorage Museum. This modern building contains a fine collection of the region's wildlife. Birds and bears. Next to old boats and fishing equipment and the wooden huts of the gold prospectors, a cross-section of the country's history. Life-size puppets and original clothing are also on display. The Alaska Native Heritage Center is located in a small forest outside the city. Here, indigenous cultures are presented with buildings and exhibitions. In replica villages around a small lake, the descendants of the 5 groups explain their traditional way of life. Visitors are shown hunting techniques and can explore the design of various buildings in detail. Each Saturday, there's a popular market, and at dawn, traders and craftsmen start to erect their stalls. In all weathers, souvenirs, kitchen utensils, herbs, objets d'art, and clothing are sold out in the open. Close by is a river frequented by small seaplanes. In Alaska, the seaplane is often the only practical way by which to travel to remote areas. The Alaska Aviation Heritage Museum is located on Lake Hood, a great display of old aircraft. A large collection of Alaska's historic air transport with accompanying explanations and photographs. Most legendary airlines and their pilots are represented here. In 1969, the Alaskan Zoo was inaugurated, featuring the region's wildlife. Giant polar bears trudge through large enclosures, carefully watched by a sea eagle. The Alaska grizzly is here too, whilst moose and fox take a rest. Portage Lake with a glacier of the same name at the eastern end of a fjord, is one of the most beautiful trips available from Anchorage. Each spring, large icebergs break off and glisten in the small lake. In the nearby Wildlife Conservation Centre are bison. And moose can be observed safely from behind a fence. An unforgettable experience. We travel by plane to an island in the southern Gulf. The only large settlement on Kodiak Island is the fishing harbour of the same name. In 1964, a tsunami washed away most of the city and its fish factories. 7,000 years ago, hunters and fishermen from Alutiiq settled here. From 1763, the Russians came to hunt and called the island Kodiak. And in 1784, a local government was formed. The Baranov Museum is dedicated to the first founder of a trading post in Russian America. Alexander Baranov built this house as a camp for otter pelts in 1808. The opulent lifestyle of the Tsar's empire can also be seen here. Another Russian legacy is the Holy Resurrection Church. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Orthodox priests came here together with Russian colonists to evangelize the indigenous population. Traditional tribal dances have been kept alive by the Kodiak Dancers. Presented to visitors from around the world. Memories of native culture. Kodiak Island is a tumultuous bad weather region on the Pacific's Ring of Fire. Yet everyone wants to go to those remote places where bears can be seen. The flight in a single-engine bush plane enables such a journey to take place, to experience bears in their natural habitat. The flight south takes 50 minutes, passing the east coast of Kodiak Island and the Old Harbour, and then onto the interior of the island to Lake Fraser. In the midst of a beautiful natural landscape, the pilot lands the seaplane on the glittering surface of the lake. A unique adventure. Now, just a short walk to the river. From a distance, a mother bear and 3 of her young are to be seen. They're Kodiak bears, and several thousands of them live in this region. The female bear is here because of the salmon, but there are also other bears nearby. She must take good care of her young because males can be dangerous. In the summer, when the salmon migrate inland up the rivers to spawn, it's the time when the bears must take full advantage of the situation. The female bear needs good nourishment and must produce much milk to feed her young. More than half do not survive the winter. Brown bears are omnivores and are born in caves which they abandon after around 4 months and usually stay for 2 to 3 years with their mother. We could watch the bears for much longer, but the guide urges us on. We've a lot further to go yet. Back again on the footpath, and the seaplane takes off in the grey of the evening. From now on, we travel north. The small village of Talkeetna is still relatively south of the Alaska mountain range, but for mountaineers, it's known as Gateway to Mount McKinley. In 1896, a trading post was established here, which by 1910 had developed into a supply point for the Susitna Valley Gold Rush. Today, the ranger station is a valuable source of information. Mount McKinley is the highest mountain in North America. It's surrounded by original subarctic wilderness that can best be seen from the air. An amazing experience. The history of this region began millions of years ago when mighty tectonic plates collided. The force of the collisions folded the granite and sedimentary rock together at a huge elevation and subsequently formed the highest mountain in North America. The aircraft lands on a glacier. For a short time, passengers can step out onto the eternal ice. On the return flight, the pilot does his best to show us the impressive and almost surreal beauty of the holy mountain of Alaska's indigenous people. A flight through an icy wonderland. The highway leads to the park entrance. In the park itself, only shuttle buses are on the road. Named after the 25th President of the United States, it was designated as Mount McKinley National Park in 1917. Pristine wilderness. An endless scene of unspoiled nature. The vegetation consists of mixed woodland in the lower regions, with tundra above, and in the highlands, rocky terrain and glaciers. The nearly 630-mile-long Alaska Range stretches in an arc across Denali Park. Bears live here too. For the grizzly bears of the tundra, there isn't a constant supply of fish. Here, they must eat the local vegetation. Wonder Lake is the largest lake in the park and is situated at the lowest and most beautiful point. The region around the lake with its typical tundra and bilberry bushes is very popular with grizzly bears. Built in 1957, the Denali Highway was, until the opening of Parks Highway, the only connection between Anchorage and this natural paradise. Moose love the aquatic plants of the lakeland. From spring to autumn, the Athabasca Indians hunted caribou, bighorn sheep and elk. And in the fall, they picked the berries of the tundra. A pumping station of the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline was built, and the oil continues to flow today. Just a few highways travel through eastern central Alaska. The Richardson Highway connects the south with the north. It's one of the most scenic routes. And Glen Highway, that travels from west to east and was named after Major Edwin Glen, travels the Talkeetna Mountains and passes near to the foothills of the impressive Matanuska Glacier. A desolate route. The next stop is Alaska's second largest city. Fairbanks, supply center for Central Alaska and the Arctic, gateway to the Arctic region. In 1901, a man named Barnett founded a trading post on the banks of the Chena River, where it was unnavigable by steamship. And close by, a year later, prospector Felix Pedro discovered a rich vein of gold here. In Golden Heart Park, the center of the city, there's a monument that commemorates the first Asians who traveled across the Bering Land Bridge. The discovery of gold changed forever the character and dimensions of the tiny trading post located in the small town. In 1923, the railroad arrived. In World War II, the U.S. Army, and in the 1970s, came the oil boom. The city was given an electricity supply, schools, police and fire stations, 3-story buildings, plus 33 saloons. A city reborn. In the open-air museum of Fairbanks Pioneer Park, an old paddle steamer welcomes visitors to the beautiful homes of a replica pioneer settlement. With various log cabins, just as they were in Barnett's time. The interior of the cabins is open to the public, and in addition to the authentic furnishings of pioneering days, there are numerous exhibits of the descendants of the Athabasca native Indians. A beautifully decorated small train travels through the 18-acre site, which is a combination of history museum and theme park. A fine way to present the history of a city. But the biggest attraction is probably a boat trip along the Chena River on a replica steamboat, a sternwheeler named Discovery. That's a great way to see the surrounding area. Past delightful wooden buildings and the untouched nature along the Chena and Tanana rivers. In a reconstructed village of the Athabasca Indians, passengers go ashore to learn more about the daily life of the indigenous people, of their clothing and customs, and their traditions. An interesting tour, but somewhat commercial. On the journey north is a section of the Alaska Pipeline. Since 1974, the giant metal pipes of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline have flowed with crude oil. About 1 million barrels of oil a day travel from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez in the south. And now, another attraction. A small train travels through a tunnel in the region's permafrost to the El Dorado gold mine. A miner explains both mine and fossils. Next, the train passes through a valley where once gold prospectors experienced the excitement of the gold rush and its fortunes, both good and bad. There's a demonstration of how gravel was washed in order to reveal gold. And visitors are also permitted to try their luck. It's laborious work searching for gold. The final leg of the journey can only be negotiated by plane from Fairbanks to the north, to the coast of the Arctic Sea. Along the Dalton Highway and the Atagon River, across the Arctic tundra and the Arctic Circle, a fantastic land with endless, desolate nature. From above, the expanses below appear to be even more infinite, and the name Alakshak, the big country, is most fitting. A stopover at Cold Fort, a small town on the highway, allows the aircraft to be refueled, and in a small saloon, the hardy men of the wilderness are gathered for the next onward flight. Next, we fly over the gates of the Arctic National Park, and the Brooks Range Mountain appears in all of its glory. In 1960, this paradise was designated as a conservation area in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. We finally arrive at Barrow, the northernmost point of inhabited North America and 500 kilometres north of the Arctic Circle. The Inuit settlement is a desolate place. The living conditions in these Arctic wastelands are extremely harsh, and most of the year it's bone-chillingly cold. Most of the buildings are built on posts in order to prevent the heat escaping into the frozen permafrost below. And for 84 days in summer, it's the place of the midnight sun. The inhabitants live by fishing and hunting, and even whales are hunted. The hunting weapons have become more sophisticated, and beneath each building there's a cooling room. Barrow functions somewhere between traditional and contemporary times, a small town at the end of the world. Even today, the promise of untamed nature and boundless freedom attracts us to America's final wilderness. Alaska is full of wild extremes and stark contrasts. A fascinating land of pure adventure.